If spirituality is about connecting with God, why would the most direct path be service to other people? At first glance, service appears horizontal, human to human, while spirituality appears vertical. Human to God, Shikubdor Kadar, Jilani collapses this separation. For him, the very qualities we attribute to the divine, mercy, generosity, justice, only become real in us when they are enacted toward others. In this frame, service is not a sentimental adone. It is a method for refining perception and disciplining the ego. This lecture develops Jilani's claim that service is a rational path to divine proximity. We will define the problem of modern, self-focused spirituality, introduce Jilani's intellectual context, and then unpack for core teachings, service as ego dissolution, service as enactment of divine attributes, service as inner-outer integration, and intention as the decisive variable. Throughout, we will connect these ideas to psychology and neuroscience to show how a classical insight maps onto contemporary evidence. Modern practices often emphasize personal optimization, mood tracking, self-care routines, and visualizing outcomes. These tools are useful, but they can drift into a closed loop of self-referencing, where the individual becomes both the center and the end goal. The result is a paradox, intense focus on inner peace that coexists with anxiety, social disconnection, and compassion fatigue. In psychological terms, excessive self-focus increases rumination, a pattern linked to anxiety and depressive symptoms. From a neuroscientific perspective, prolonged self-referential processing is associated with sustained activity in the default mode network. When the default mode network dominates without balancing networks for task, focus, and empathy, individuals report more worry and less prosocial behavior. Media exposure adds another layer. Continuous contact with distressing content can produce compassion fatigue, emotional numbing that reduces helping behavior rather than increasing it. Jilani's diagnosis is conceptually similar, but expressed in spiritual language. The Nafs, the egoic, self-involved stance, becomes the veil that blocks awareness of God. His prescription is equally direct. Serve people not to feel superior or to perform goodness, but to train perception to recognize the divine qualities that are always present. Service converts spirituality from self-absorption to calibrated attention. Jilani lived in 11th to 12th century Baghdad, a center of legal scholarship and urban need. His school combined rigorous jurisprudence with organized social assistance, feeding travelers, supporting the poor, and teaching practical ethics. Service in his community was not charity as branding. It was curriculum. The premise was straightforward. If you want to refine character and approach God, enter the human world and practice the attributes you claim to value. Philosophically, Jilani treats service as a mirror of divine attributes. By acting mercifully, we participate in mercy. By giving justly, we participate in justice. Rationally, this provides a testable environment for growth. Virtue is not inferred from feelings, but assessed through behavior under real constraints. Time, fatigue, disagreement, and diversity of needs. Modern social neuroscience converges here. Altruistic behavior engages reward and affiliation systems, supports meaning construction, and is correlated with lower stress markers. The point is not that neurochemistry explains service, but that service measurably changes the brain states through which we experience meaning and connection. Jilani's claim is that the ego thrives on centrality. Service displaces the self. from the center of attention and therefore weakens the motives that keep ego rigid. When action is directed purely toward the benefit of another, the self is temporarily decentered. That decentering is not self-negation, but perceptual recalibration. The field of relevance expands beyond me and mine. In Jilani's lexicon, this creates a small opening for Tawhid. Perceiving unity rather than fragmentation, self-transcendence frameworks argue that well-being increases when goals align with values larger than the self. From a neuroscientific angle, tasks that require perspective-taking and prosocial intention reduce dominance of default mode activity and recruit networks for attention and empathy, improving emotion regulation and reducing intrusive self-talk. Consider responding to a colleague's crisis with practical help, arranging coverage, sharing knowledge, or staying late to finish an urgent task. Heart rate variability often improves when actions are aligned with pro-social intention, indicating greater autonomic balance. In Jilani's frame, this is more than physiology. It is soul calibration. Each act that is not about you loosens egoic contraction and normalizes the inner posture toward humility. Jilani's view is that the names and qualities attributed to God are not abstract categories. They become meaningful when enacted. Feeding embodies Al-Razak, the provider. Forgiving embodies Al-Ghafur, the forgiver. Advocating fairly embodies Al-Adel, the just. This reframes theology as applied ethics. Knowledge of the divine is not limited to conceptual assent. It is practiced competency. The claim is testable in daily life. If one professes mercy yet repeatedly dehumanizes others under pressure, the profession lacks embodiment. Research on embodied cognition suggests that behavior feeds identity. Repeated compassionate behaviors strengthen neural pathways for empathy and prosocial decision-making. Through operant conditioning, small prosocial acts, consistently repeated, become habitual responses, turning virtue from aspiration into reflex. A physician who treats patients with consistent humility does more than execute protocols. She stabilizes a clinical environment in which trust rises and errors fall. In Jilani's terms, she is a conduit for a quality greater than herself, and that participation is a practical experience of nearness to God. Without outward service, spirituality risks becoming introspection without outcome. Jilani argues that humans are designed as conduits. Energy, knowledge, and compassion should circulate. When they circulate, the inner life remains clear. When they stagnate, perception distorts. The person is a microcosm that mirrors larger realities. Service keeps this microcosm in rhythm with the broader order by directing capacities toward real needs. The internal and external systems then co-regulate. In effective science, attempted emotional suppression often increases physiological arousal and cognitive load. Directed compassionate action, by contrast, can reduce stress, reactivity, and enhance resilience. Psychoneuroimmunology links consistent helping behaviors to improved immune markers and lower cortisol. The model is not mystical. Channel energy outward in structured, prosocial ways, and both body and mind stabilize. Regular mentoring, even 1 hour weekly, improves the mentor's sense of purpose, reduces loneliness, and correlates with better health behaviors. Jilani would interpret this as ontological alignment. The more one's capacities serve creation, the more one's being harmonizes with the Creator's order. Jilani's warning is clear. Serving others for recognition is hidden ego. The same visible act can either elevate or reinforce the self, depending on nija. Intention. Intention is the classifier of moral meaning. Outwardly identical actions can carry opposite ethical valence because the internal motive changes the cognitive context. Performative service aims at impressions. Sincere service aims at benefit. Intrinsic motivation, purpose and compassion, predicts long-term persistence and well-being more than extrinsic motivation, praise and status. Neuroimaging differentiates empathic concern from self-reward circuits activated by public approval. When motive is image management, helping can increase anxiety. Because attention is split between the recipient and the audience, anonymous giving often produces a quieter, more stable sense of relief than publicized giving. The difference is not superstition. It is cognitive economy. Without the overhead of self-presentation, attention remains on the need itself, and the act integrates more cleanly into character. Service does not purchase divine favor. It removes impediments to recognizing the favor already given. God's nearness is constant. The ego's opacity changes. Serving creation is a way to polish perception. Empathy shifts attention bias from me-centered to relation-centered. This shift reorganizes predictive models in the brain. Others' needs become salient, and the sense of self enlarges to include responsibility. As this stabilizes, individuals report meaning, not because outcomes always succeed, but because purpose structures experience. This resolves a common misconception. Serving others is not a detour from personal spiritual advancement. It is the most direct experiment in embodying the qualities one attributes to God. The hand that helps another is training the mind to perceive beyond itself. Set a minimal, repeatable service behavior, one check-in call, 1 hour of tutoring, one practical task for a neighbor or colleague. Small, valued actions raise baseline mood and reduce avoidance. Track completion weekly to reinforce consistency. Before an interaction, choose one attribute to practice: patience in a queue, generosity in feedback, or fairness in resource allocation. Naming the attribute engages goal framing and improves adherence. Afterward, reflect for 2 minutes. Was the motive empathy or ego? What would improve calibration tomorrow? Service loses clarity when fueled by pity, anger, or reactivity. Use short, repeatable regulation techniques, paced breathing for 2 minutes, or a brief Dicker cycle. This reduces limbic arousal and preserves executive function, keeping service effective and sustainable. Once a week, answer 3 prompts in writing. Which act of service aligned most with my values, and why? Where did self-image contaminate my motive? What structural change would make next week's service more consistent? Written reflection externalizes intention, reducing cognitive drift. Build or join a purpose-driven micro-community, a study circle that funds a meal drive, a clinic team that commits to a pro bono hour, a workplace group that mentors interns from under-resourced schools. Group identity increases persistence through mutual accountability and social norming. This mirrors Jilani's institutional model. Individual discipline multiplied by communal design. Adopt 2 simple rules. Default to low visibility, help unless visibility is necessary to mobilize resources. Separate impact review from public reporting. Measure outcomes privately first. Share publicly only to recruit support. These guardrails protect intention while keeping projects practical. Jilani's claim is both spiritually rigorous and empirically coherent. Serving people brings one closer to God because it simultaneously weakens the ego, enacts divine attributes, integrates inner states with outer behavior, and clarifies intention. The path is not theoretical. It is a daily practice of directing attention and capacity toward real needs with disciplined motives. In psychological language, this is self-transcendence supported by prosocial motivation and emotion regulation. In neuroscientific terms, it is the cultivation of empathic and executive networks that stabilize meaning while reducing unproductive self. In Jilani's terms, it is Khidma Laila, service for God, where the self becomes an instrument rather than a project. The takeaway is practical. You do not approach God by fleeing the world, but by participating in it intelligently. Begin with small, consistent acts. Frame them as attribute practice. Protect intention, and build collective structures that sustain effort. The more service becomes your default mode, the less central the ego feels. And in that decentering, divine nearness becomes not an idea but an experienced orientation.